February 6, 2024, News Report 1. Voice of America reports that on February 6, the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit ruled that former President Trump no longer enjoys presidential immunity from prosecution. In the case involving allegations of conspiracy to overturn the 2020 presidential election results, Trump can face criminal charges. In the 57-page ruling, the court judge stated that in this criminal case, Trump is considered an ordinary citizen and is accountable for his actions. Currently, Trump faces 4 criminal cases totaling 91 charges, including conspiracy to commit fraud and conspiracy to obstruct official proceedings. Trump has employed various delaying tactics in an attempt to postpone the ruling on the cases until after the November 2024 election. He believes that as long as he is elected President of the United States, he will not be prosecuted. A survey released by Bloomberg and the market research firm Morning Consult on January 31 showed that if Trump is convicted in any of the criminal cases, 53% of voters would not vote for him in the election. Therefore, this ruling is crucial for Trump. The 4 criminal cases against Trump will continue to be heard, and the pace of the hearings may accelerate. His delaying tactics may fail, but they may also succeed, and the current situation is full of uncertainty. Trump's spokesperson stated that Trump will appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. News Report 2. The American newspaper, Stars and Stripes, reports that the multinational military exercise codenamed Counter North by the U.S. Pacific Air Force has begun. This annual exercise, which began in 1978, aims to train pilots for large-scale multinational deployment and exercises. The exercise involves 1,700 U.S. soldiers and 700 soldiers from Australia, Canada, France, South Korea, and Japan. There will be 85 fighter jets taking off from 3 Pacific islands and 6 airports to execute 1,400 combat missions. The U.S. Air Force will deploy 4 B-52 strategic bombers to practice global direct strike capabilities throughout the exercise. This exercise has established a new command and control system and network, and is jointly commanded for the first time by the United States, Australia, and Japan, demonstrating more clearly the movement of troops in complex environments. In recent years, the Counter North exercise has focused on practicing a strategy called Agile Combat Deployment, aimed at reducing deployments at the front lines and dispersing main forces to enhance the resilience and survivability of Air Force aircraft. This is aimed at enhancing the interoperability of the U.S. military and its allies and deterring China. Additionally, according to the Yonhap news agency, a U.S. RC-135U strategic reconnaissance aircraft took off from Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, Japan, on February 6 and conducted a long flight in the sea outside the Gunsan, South Korea. The RC-135U reconnaissance aircraft can collect electromagnetic waves from hundreds of kilometers away and missile bases and conduct summary analysis to understand the distribution of the opponent's radar. This move is seen as a strategic deterrent, especially before conducting long flights in the western waters of South Korea, which is in line with South Korea's strategic assertion of eliminating North Korea. News Report 3. Time Weekly reports that rain and snow weather in Hubei and other places has caused traffic delays, which have spread to other cities such as Guangzhou and Chongqing. The report mentioned the experiences of several passengers. Li Yuyu bought a high-speed rail ticket from Guangzhou to Changsha at 8 p.m. on February 4, but the train was delayed for 3 hours and 40 minutes, originally only 19 minutes late. Wang Chen bought a train ticket from Guangzhou back to Hubei's Guangshui on February 4. He waited at Guangzhou station for 16 hours and did not board the train until 10 a.m. on February 5. Another passenger named Xiao Wu bought a train ticket from Chongqing to Shizhezhuang, Hebei on February 4, passing through Wuhan, Hubei. However, due to a blizzard, the train stopped halfway for 16 hours. In addition, the China National Disaster Reduction and Relief Commission and the Ministry of Emergency Management announced on February 6 that they have initiated a national level 4 response to the low-temperature rain, snow, and ice disasters in Hunan, Hubei, and other places, guiding local authorities to assist affected people. The report also mentioned that heavy snowfall began in Hunan, Hubei, Hunan, and other places on February 1, leading to train suspensions and highway traffic jams, but local governments did not take strengthened response measures. It wasn't until a large number of complaints appeared online that local governments began to take action. The National Emergency Management Department started the emergency response on February 5, and Hubei province started mobilizing on February 7. The report criticized the local governments for not responding timely to the impact of rainy and snowy weather and pointed out the problem of initiating emergency responses only after disasters occurred. News Report 4. Australian Prime Minister Albanese expressed indignation on February 6 over the death row sentence imposed on Australian Chinese writer Yang Hengjuan and vowed to pressure China to release him. Albanese said Yang Hengjuan's health condition is poor and the death row sentence is extremely harsh. Australia will continue to respond to China with the strongest language. The Beijing Intermediate People's Court sentenced Yang Hengjuan to death for espionage on February 5, with a 2-year reprieve. The Australian Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the Chinese ambassador to Australia on the same day. Prior to this, since Albanese took office in May 2022, Sino-Australian relations have stabilized, and China has resumed importing red wine, iron ore, and coal from Australia. After being detained in China for 3 years, Cheng Lei returned to Australia in October last year. Albanese visited China in November 2023, becoming the first Australian Prime Minister to visit China in 7 years. China's decision to sentence Yang Hengjuan to death row has become a new point of conflict in Sino-Australian relations, injecting uncertainty into bilateral relations. This irrational move may cost China, as the current situation is different from before, and China can no longer manipulate Australia. The death row sentence on Australian citizens may have consequences. News Report 5. Kyodo News reported that the Japan Coast Guard stated that 4 Chinese Coast Guard ships successively entered the waters around the Diaoyu Islands on February 6 at 4 p.m. and left the waters around the Diaoyu Islands heading north at 5:30 p.m. One of the Coast Guard ships was carrying a cannon. This is the 3rd time this year that Chinese Coast Guard ships have entered the waters around the Diaoyu Islands. Although these actions may not bring practical benefits, they may provoke consequences and anger Japan. Japan may organize these events and respond at an opportune time. News Report 6. Agence France-Presse reported that Hamas stated on February 6 that they have responded to the ceasefire agreement proposed by Qatar and Egypt and have a positive attitude towards it. Last week, the heads of intelligence agencies from the United States and Israel drafted a ceasefire agreement with officials from Egypt and Qatar. The agreement includes a 40-day ceasefire on both sides, with Hamas releasing the remaining civilian hostages and soldiers in stages, while Israel releases Palestinian prisoners. Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed expressed optimism about Hamas's overall positive response to the events during a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Blinken. Blinken stated that the U.S. is reviewing Hamas's response and believes that it is possible to reach an agreement, but there is still much work to be done. Blinken will discuss the ceasefire agreement with Israeli officials on February 7. The Israeli Prime Minister's office stated that they will carefully evaluate the details of the ceasefire agreement, but Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly stated that he will not agree to all aspects of the ceasefire agreement. News Report 7. Voice of America reported that the China National Offshore Oil Corporation, CNOOC, signed a 25-year oil extraction agreement with the Taliban regime in Afghanistan a year ago. According to the agreement, the Chinese company needs to invest $150 million in the first year and accumulate $540 million in investment by 2026. However, senior Taliban officials pointed out that CNOOC's estimates of materials and labor costs are inaccurate, leading to inadequate investment. So far, the company has only invested $49 million, accounting for only 1% of the original plan. Last year, the Afghan Ministry of Finance profited $26 million from the oil project. The U.S. Geological Survey pointed out in 2011 that Afghanistan's Amu Darya Basin contains 962 million barrels of oil. CNOOC plans to drill 22 wells this year and increase the daily production to 15,000 barrels. The report also mentioned that President Xi Jinping accepted the credentials of 42 ambassadors to China at the Great Hall of the People on January 30, including the ambassador of the Taliban regime, Karimi. This move is seen as acknowledging the legitimacy of the Taliban regime, injecting uncertainty into bilateral relations. News Report 8. On February 6, the China-U.S. Economic Working Group held its third meeting in Beijing, co-chaired by Chinese Vice Minister of Finance Liao Min and U.S. Deputy Secretary of the Treasury Shang Bo. Liao Min has served as Deputy Director of the Office of the Central Financial and Economic Affairs Commission since May 2018 and concurrently as Deputy Minister of Finance since June of the same year. However, he no longer holds the position of Deputy Director of the Office of the Central Financial and Economic Affairs Commission since October last year, only serving as Deputy Minister of Finance. The U.S. Treasury Department stated that U.S. officials raised concerns at the meeting about the impact of Chinese overcapacity on American workers and businesses. According to Xinhua News Agency, representatives from China and the United States discussed topics including the macroeconomic situations and policies of both countries, G20 cooperation, debt issues in developing countries, and industrial policies. China expressed concern about U.S. tariffs on China and restrictions on bilateral investment, and both sides agreed to hold the next meeting in April. In addition, Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng, who is also the head of the Chinese side of the China-U.S. Economic and Trade Working Group, met with Shang Bo in Beijing. He Lifeng stated that China and the United States should jointly implement the important consensus reached by the leaders of the two countries at the San Francisco meeting, continue to make full use of the China-U.S. Economic Working Group channel, deepen exchanges and cooperation, stimulate economic cooperation between China and the United States, maintain channel stability, accumulate consensus results, and stabilize bilateral relations. News Report 9. Voice of America reports that on February 6, the U.S. Senate confirmed Campbell as Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources, succeeding Sherman. Campbell previously served as Coordinator for Indo-Pacific Affairs at the U.S. National Security Council, advocating competition with China but not seeking conflict and confrontation, which is consistent with the Biden administration's position. At the confirmation hearing, Campbell stated that China believes the United States is in a sharp decline and that the United States must prove that this is not the case. News Report 10. Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen visited the Hsinchu base on February 6 to visit the Army and Air Force missile units and inspect the training of a group of new recruits serving in a one-year compulsory military service. Since January 1 this year, Taiwan has extended the duration of compulsory military service from 4 months to 1 year. These new recruits were born in 2005 and enlisted on January 25. During the inspection, Tsai Ing-wen requested the Ministry of National Defense to implement various training courses, continue to review, ensure training effectiveness. Tsai Ing-wen has always attached importance to the National Army and often visits troops for inspection. In addition, the Ministry of National Defense of Taiwan announced that on February 5, there were 25 PLA fighter jets and 6 warships operating around the Taiwan Strait. Among them, 13 fighter jets crossed the middle line of the Taiwan Strait and entered the southwest airspace of Taiwan. On the same day, the Ministry of National Defense of Taiwan also found a Chinese balloon west of Keelung, which also crossed the middle line of the Taiwan Strait. On February 6, 9 PLA fighter jets and 5 warships were active around Taiwan, but no fighter jets crossed the line. Similarly, a Chinese balloon was found southwest of Keelung. As the Spring Festival approaches, the PLA is still active around the Taiwan Strait, which may cause dissatisfaction among the Taiwanese people. During the Spring Festival, Taiwan should have a peaceful atmosphere, rather than exacerbating tension with military activities. News Report 11. According to Kyodo News, TSMC announced on February 6 that it will build its second chip plant in Kumamoto Prefecture, Japan, near its first chip plant. Kumamoto Prefecture is where Sony's factory is located, so TSMC chose to build the plant there. This Japanese chip plant is jointly established by TSMC, Sony, Denso, and Toyota Motor Corporation, with TSMC holding 86.5% of the shares, Sony holding 6%, Denso holding 5.5%, and Toyota holding 2%. TSMC's first chip plant will hold its opening ceremony on February 24 this year, while the second plant is planned to begin construction at the end of this year and is expected to start operation in 2027. The second plant will produce 6nm and 7nm chips, which are more advanced than the technology used in the first plant. The total investment of these two plants exceeds $20 billion and is expected to create 3,400 job opportunities. News Report 12. According to Bloomberg, President Xi Jinping listened to a briefing from the China Securities Regulatory Commission on the stock market situation on February 6, and the stock market surged significantly that day. The Shanghai Composite Index rose by 3.2%, and the Chinext Index rose by 6.3%. However, on February 7, the gains in the A-share market began to narrow. The Shanghai Composite Index closed at 2,791 points, up 2 points or 0.07%, and the Chinext Index closed at 1,663 points, down 4 points. However, a total of 3,400 stocks rose in the Shanghai and Shenzhen markets. Despite the stimulus from good news, the upward trend in the A-share market began to slow down. It is uncertain how long the news can be sustained, as the upward trend driven by news stimuli often fails to last.